So I will bid you all a good afternoon, a hello, and thank you for coming out to the JC Raulston Arboretum today. We are going to be doing a plant lovers tour, trees you would use. We've got our director, Mark Weathington, here, who's going to take us around the garden, show us some trees that you might fashion a box out of, that you might use to spice foods, for example. There's many uses of woods, lots of reasons to think outside the box. It should be a great program. We're going to learn a lot. We're going to see a lot of beautiful plants. And hey, the weather is beautiful today, so this should be just an absolutely beautiful program.
All right. Well, I appreciate those of you who came out for this. I am a nascent woodworker. I do like working with wood. Most of that is involved building things with wood I've gotten from the hardware store, the lumber store. But I have recently gotten into turning wood and things like that, and it's got me interested in some of the non-traditional wood products that we grow out here that can be used for different things, what they can be used for, and how they have been used, how they're used now, and how they've been used in the past. Not every wood is the same. Not every wood is good for turning. Not every wood is good for making planks. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the other characteristics of some of these plants, but really going to focus on the wood and its characteristics. So we're just going to go ahead and mostly get into it. I do have some notes. I don't always have notes when I'm talking, but I will tell you that some of this is I had to look up and find. But I did also want to point out something that a lot of people who've been at the Arboretum a lot of times don't know. And that is, if you go into our education center, the Ruby C. McSwain Education Center, the reception desk has a kind of a patchwork, a quilt, we call it, of woods on the front. And if you just look at it, you just think it's a nice decorative piece with all these little bits of wood. But actually, we have a key to it. Every one of those little squares is a different wood. So you can kind of see the grain and the color of those woods there. And so 44 different woods there on that. And I should say, sometimes when you have, say, a maple, you're not sure which maple that is. And when they say bird's eye maple or something like that, that just means that's often the same species. It's just the wood has grown different, has a different texture to it, different grain to it. But if you're interested in seeing that, it's a really neat thing. This is faded because it's from 2002 and has been sitting in the sun. But the pieces on the desk are really beautiful. So I recommend coming in there and looking at that. Often staff doesn't even know about this, including staff that walks by this thing every day.
Including George Trudeau.
I wasn't going to put you on the spot and ask if you do, but yeah. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Jump right to the first tree. We're going to make this going to be an interesting one. Our first plant is one of my favorites at the Arboretum. I say that often about plants. It is this evergreen tree. This is Cinnamomum wilsonii, Wilson's cinnamon or camphor-tree. Cinnamomum, we know cinnamon, that is a couple of species of Cinnamomum are used to make cinnamon. The original is Cinnamomum zealandicum. Subtropical tree, won't grow for us. We could grow a few different cinnamons. We could probably grow the actual camphor tree, Cinnamomum camphora, here now. Things have warmed up enough that we can probably grow that. But this is one of the best for us. Cinnamomum wilsonii makes a pretty good size evergreen tree. You can see it was planted right by this structure for a little bit of protection. And I can remember 17 years ago when I started, it was just about to go above the top there. We were waiting to see if it was going to start getting more damage as it got taller than this structure. It has not. It has been just rock solid year in and year out. So, obviously bark of cinnamon in general is makes cinnamon. That's what you get. They take twigs and they peel the bark off, and that's what cinnamon comes from. You don't get cinnamon from this tree, but Cinnamomum, especially Cinnamomum camphora, and probably some other species, were super important for Chinese shipbuilding. There were 3 major species used in Chinese shipbuilding, and or 3 major plants that were used in traditional Chinese shipbuilding, and I'm going to show you all 3 of them. So Cinnamomum is the first one. Now, what I really like is some of the other true cinnamons that have that cinnamon smell to them. The wood on here doesn't really smell like cinnamon, but one of the uses that I've seen is in Vietnam. Everywhere you go to eat or anywhere, they always have a little jar of toothpicks, and they put the toothpicks in a little jar that's made out of cinnamon wood, and it gives it that little bit of cinnamon flavor. I thought the toothpicks were cinnamon. It wound up it was not. Cinnamomum is used for furniture some, but not a whole lot. It is sometimes used for firewood as well, or charcoal, because they don't let it get this big often. They'll cut it and it coppices. They'll put up a bunch of shoots that are smaller, and they can cut that, and it just keeps coming up like that. So they can keep getting kind of small diameter things that are used for firewood and create charcoal. And that's often what they do with the true cinnamon as well. That's how they get the smaller diameter branches for the bark that we use as a spice. Any questions? We do occasionally offer this. Mostly we'll get a handful of seedlings, and we'll sometimes take those and dig them up and offer them for sale or in our auctions and things like that. They're tricky to root, we found, although some people have more success than us. But once a tree gets this mature, it gets very difficult to take cuttings and root them. Any questions? All right. All right. Our next tree is Cornus officinalis. So Cornus is dogwood. That's our native dogwood. Flowering dogwood is Cornus florida. This is Cornus officinalis. Officinalis in Latin names often means that it's somehow useful. It's something often for medicines or for use in other ways. So Cornus officinalis, beautiful small tree. This is actually one. Now I got to double check. Yeah, this is one that JC Raulston introduced called Spring Glow. It was often, he introduced it as Cornus moss Spring Glow. Cornus moss and Cornus officinalis are called the cornelian cherries because they have yellow flowers, bright yellow flowers in little clusters, and then they're followed by red fruits that are kind of cherry looking, bigger than our native dogwoods. One of the main differences, one of the easy ways to tell them apart is flowering time. Cornus officinalis flowers a little bit earlier than Cornus moss. And one of the things that they always said about this when it was Cornus moss was it was early flowering for a Cornus moss. Well, that's because it's really Cornus officinalis. So we've gotten the name correct on it. But you can see you got nice, it's a nice foliage, early spring, bright yellow flowers before the leaves come out, just this mound of yellow. It gets pretty good fall color in most years, not phenomenal, but pretty decent fall color. And then it's got beautiful bark as well. The peeling bark on there is really spectacular. As a wood, Cornus in general tends to be a very hard wood, especially the cornelian cherries. So, what do you make when you have something that's a really hard, durable wood? A lot of times that's tool handles. These don't get to have massive trunks on them, so you have to use fairly small pieces. So tool handles, and one of the traditional uses for cornelian cherry is golf club heads. So your golf club wood could very well be made of cornelian cherry if it isn't made of graphite or titanium or whatever they're made out of now. But beautiful plant, and it's one that people really don't, they're underutilized around here, but they're really tough plants, and those those gold flowers in early spring are really, really spectacular. And the fruits are edible. This has a lot of medicinal uses as well. I don't know what they are, but apparently it cures everything. Like all plants, and especially it seems like Chinese traditional medicine, among the things it takes care of is impotence, like most of them. I don't know, everything does, but very cool plant. Got to see this thing in spring to really appreciate it. And I'm hoping we're going to have a good fall color year this year. You know what you need for fall color. People always try and figure out if it's going to be good fall color. Sunny days, cool nights. Nights haven't been terribly cool, but we're getting those sunny days for sure. So we may get some good fall color. Any questions?
Is it getting to be late for fall color this year?
Is it getting to be late for fall color this year? It is a late year for fall color because we haven't had anything cool. So there are some things that transition from actively growing to not actively growing, which will, some of those will have fall color kind of right on schedule. And those are ones that are shutting down because of day length. Some plants respond to day length. So we have some things with fall color that are really, you can pretty much schedule them because of day length. And then we have others that are responding to temperature. So that's why maples are the big ones when we talk about, clear days and cool nights. That's if you know that it hasn't been cloudy in the northeast and you want to go up and see fall color, that's a good year. If it's been just cloudy and rainy all fall as it's getting cooler, they don't have as good fall color. Same here. And as you go around the Arboretum here, you can look at the Japanese maples, and most of them have really not started coloring much at all. And that's normal. What'll happen is we'll either get some cool weather, some cool nights, and they'll start turning color, or we'll get a freeze and they'll all turn brown and we won't get any fall color at all. So it's, feast or famine a lot of times.
Any other differences between officinalis and moss besides this that flowers earlier?
Oh, shoot. Any other differences between Cornus moss and Cornus officinalis? Where they come from. One of them has, and I can't remember which, has, especially when the leaves are young, on the leaves on the underside where the veins meet, there is more hairs there. It's a little more tomentose on the bottoms of the leaves. There may be some other differences, but they are small. They are small differences, and
They both have the exfoliating bark.
they both have exfoliating bark to different degrees. Spring Glow, that was one of the reasons it was JC selected it. It does have really good bark for a Cornus moss or officinalis, but I've seen some with better bark, and I've seen some with pretty just kind of average, okay bark. Any other questions? All right, we will keep moving. So, another kind of well-loved wood in Asia, especially Japan and also China, is Zelkova. The species you see here growing most often is Zelkova serrata. This is actually Zelkova sinica, but most of the Zelkovas have pretty similar wood characteristics. As a tree, they are large trees. In China, the common name translates to southern elm because it is very closely related to elm. Zelkova is in the Ulmaceae family with elms. This one is a little more southern than Zelkova serrata, but is perfectly hardy here. Makes a large tree, has this great exfoliating bark. Flowers are insignificant. It can get very good fall color, just like Zelkova serrata. I find some years Zelkova serrata is very good, kind of burgundies and purples mostly, but some orange and red highlights. Same with this. It's not great every year. One of the characteristics of Zelkova, many of the species, is that they tend to have these very tight crotch angles. When you look at a Zelkova serrata, all the branches seem to come from one spot. I have really only seen one large Zelkova split apart, and that was during a really bad ice storm up in the mountains. And they actually, it was at a nursery I worked at. We actually cabled it together and winched it tight with a come along, brought it in tight, put a bolt through there, left the come along on it for about a year, and the tree survived just fine. So this wood is kind of a golden yellow color. It's got a really, Zelkova tends to have a really strong grain pattern. So if you want something where the wood is kind of not the feature, this is not the best choice because this has a really strong grain pattern. So if you're making furniture out of it, it'll have all the you know, it'll really look distinct. It's kind of medium hard. It's not a super hard wood. It's relatively easy to work. It is used a lot in furniture. Because of the grain pattern, it's often used for boxes and cutting boards and things like that. But in Asia, also used for construction. And in Japan, I've been in many houses where the owner could tell me, you know, these posts are Zelkova, these boards are cryptomeria, this lintel is Cunninghamia. You know, they could really tell me what all the woods that they had built their house out of, which just sounds amazing, especially when you got, you know, cheap white pine as the major construction material in most of our houses here. Any questions? The strong grain pattern, is it strong like oak? You tend to get a lot of movement in it, but oaks, you tend to get a lot of that grain pattern because how oaks grow, the wood grows kind of in a circle. Some trees grow with all their vascular parts going straight up and down. Oaks grow twisted. So that when you cut that into boards, you get that grain pattern that comes from that. This, I don't think it's the same methodology for why it does that, but it just, you get kind of, it's darker. There's very clear distinction between in the vascular pattern, and it, you know, you get kind of the waviness, but I don't think it's the same mechanism for why oaks do at any rate. Can we get Zelkova wood here? I don't know about that. Zelkova, I mean, in the US for sure, Zelkova is not, you know, farmed, or not, you know, there aren't plantations of it for wood, but it is a commonly grown street tree, commonly enough that there may be some availability. It may, you know, anything you find may have come from Asia. I'm not sure. I would think it would be not easily obtainable, but not impossible. Anything else? All right. Don't have to go far for the next one. So, next we have Buxus sempervirens, boxwood. I don't think of boxwood for lumber, but its name, boxwood, actually comes from the fact that it can be used to create boxes. It's a very, very fine-grained wood, kind of really whitish or pale, creamy color. Now, we have bred boxwoods to be little dwarf things in little round balls to go in front of our you know, colonial style houses and every other houses. And so we think of them as these little tiny shrubs, but in their actual habitat, they can be, you know, quite nice single trunked trees. They're not all small. There's a lot of variation in the wild, but they're actually beautiful trees. So boxwoods, evergreen, sempervirens, that's the common boxwood, is that means semper, always, virens, green. So it's a nice evergreen shrub. It's can have on a hot day kind of a smell of cat pee, which is not altogether pleasant. They take pruning. You can prune them into all kinds of topiary shapes if you like. But what they're underutilized as is fantastic plants for the shade garden. And they're beautiful if you could get one that's more of a natural looking plant, the species, which will grow up into a beautiful tree in the shade. Very, very drought tolerant. They have far fewer problems with leaf miners and other issues when they grow in the shade rather than out in the blazing sun. In fact, we had a large oak right where that large tree right there was, that was kind of shading our boxwood collection, and it split apart in an ice storm, and we planted that tree that's there now because it's one of the fastest growing shade trees you can get. And we wanted to provide a little bit of shade for this, bring back a little more shade for this area. So the wood, when you get in the wood and are working it, it's really good for carving and for turning. It's not good for flat pieces. It tends to warp. It tends to crack when you do that. But it's used a lot for, fine like chess pieces, some musical instruments, that kind of thing. Boxes, but we tend not to have the bigger trunks of these single trunk trees that were found in the wild in kind of the Caucasus region of Europe, Asia areas. Questions? How old is this one? I don't know. This is a real old form, Myosotitifolia. It wouldn't be named that now. That's a pre-1959 name because it's Latinized, the cultivar name. I'd have to go back and look. It's probably 25, 26 years old, at least. But they can get much larger, and like I said, you can see them as single trunk trees. There was a tree at another garden I worked at that was easily 10 inches in diameter and was limbed up just like a small tree, kind of conical shaped tree, a little bit open in a woodland area. And I had several very good plants people come to me and say, "What is this? What is this? What is this?" I said, "Well, this is a boxwood," and I mean, once you said it, anybody who knows boxwood would say, yeah, but it just, the form was so different that kind of never even entered their heads. But yeah, it's a shame we don't see that actually more than we see the little meatballs. Other questions? All right. Now we have the tree that kind of got me thinking a lot about this, really. What we have behind me is Dalbergia hupeiensis. So it's the Dalbergia from Hubei province. Does anybody know the genus Dalbergia? Dalbergia is, when people talk about true rosewood, they're talking about Dalbergia, a tropical Dalbergia. There are a lot of things called rosewood. If you go to a lumber company store and you get rosewood, you are not getting Dalbergia. You are getting something else. It is highly illegal to ship a Dalbergia international. It is CITES 2, so the Convention on the International Trade of Endangered Species. So it's like cycads and palms and orchids in that sense, or tigers and that kind of thing is where it falls. So there are several species of Dalbergia that are known as redwood or different variations on that are true Dalbergias, and then other species as well. I did not know that. I don't know my tropical trees very well, and it took a young man who was interested in a lot of things. His father owns a nursery, but he's a fascinating young guy. And so he asked me about the wood on this Dalbergia hupeensis, because he said, you know, that's rosewood. And I'll be honest, I still don't know. One of these days, we're gonna cut off a big limb and we're gonna give it to a good woodworker to turn, to use, to see how good it is. But Dalbergia in general has, you know, pinkish to reddish wood that can be pretty variable, but that's why it's called rosewood. It's used for all kinds of uses. It's very, very close grained. It holds up outdoors really well. You know, if you were very, very rich back when this was available in the trade, you know, you might have decks or railings, balconies, outdoor furniture made from rosewood, or fine indoor furniture as well. As a tree, I think it's a really nice looking shade tree. It is, if not the last, it is one of the last, and I would put money on it being the last tree in the Arboretum to leaf out in the spring. It is very late leafing out, but it makes a beautiful plant. Like I said, we're gonna see about that wood. If the wood really is good, you know, I think it has potential as a plantation type product. You know, rosewood is such a highly desired wood. If you could get the true genus of rosewood to have, you know, high quality wood that you know, could be grown in field, it would be pretty amazing. What I've talked to some forestry folks about, and they have actually, you know, this is something that has crossed their mind before, is the one of the most maligned exotic trees that grow around here kind of wild along street sides is Paulownia tomentosa, the princess tree, which is not invasive. It does not invade native plants. It grows on sidewalks and along roadsides in disturbed areas, but it is very fast growing. And the wood is almost as light as balsa wood. And it is more rot resistant, untreated, than red cedar, our native red cedar. So you've got this quick growing, very, you know, a valuable wood if we would, you know, harvest it and use it. And I thought, you know, you could interplant these. Dalbergia is very slow. The princess tree is very fast. You could grow princess tree and harvest it. I know somebody who has a whole field of princess tree that he uses to make bluebird houses out of, but you could harvest it and let the Dalbergia grow, which is going to have a much longer harvest period. But as it grows and fills in and shades out the space, Paulownia can't grow in the shade, and it will just die out or languish, and then you're getting ready to harvest your Dalbergia. After you harvest it, you can either put in more Paulownia, or else it'll come up again of its own, plant more Dalbergia, and you could have this cycle where you're double cropping and you've got a quicker return, and that return, the Paulownia, you could harvest probably multiple times while you're waiting for this more valuable crop to come along. I think it could be a very interesting forestry model, but I haven't checked the wood yet to actually see if it's really good wood. So don't put it under, you know, 100 acres.
Seedlings from there?
We never get seedlings growing, but you know, we could collect seed on it. It's loaded with seed. We could collect it and germinate it. The seed is a hard seed. It lasts for a while. What I find with plants like this is if you get it green, it'll germinate quickly. Otherwise, you got to do some treatments to it. Let me see if I can find some seed down here. You can see either from the tree up there or from this, it's in the bean family. And so you get these kind of clusters of bean pods. It has one seed in it. we don't always get good seed. And this may be because it's fallen early that this doesn't have good seed. We do have another selection of it in the nursery that we haven't planted out. And maybe if we had two, we'd get better cross-pollination. But we do sometimes get good seed in here. This is a good seed, but it'll get a very hard coat. And I found with a lot of these beans that are hard to germinate, you get the seed pods before you think they're actually fully ripened, and you sow that seed before it has the really hard coat, and it pops right up. Whereas if you wait, you really have to do a lot in terms of scarification to get it going. It just won't go. You can boil water and soak it in the boiled water. You know, pour boiling water over it and let it soak for 24 hours, and then sow it. You can manually, like take sandpaper or something and go through the seed coat and then soak it and do it. But if you get it ripe, it's a lot easier. I've been talking about a lot of Asian species, so I wanted to at least include a couple of native ones. So this is our big leaf magnolia, Magnolia macrophylla. And you can see it's got a great big leaf. It's a good name for it, big leaf magnolia. This is native to the southeast. Beautiful plant. If you're paying attention as you're driving down some roadsides in the southeast, you can see it, especially when you're going over overpasses, because it's often growing in a little bit lower lands. It's a great way to view it because it has great big magnolia flowers, great big white flowers. And those flowers are held right here at the terminus of the little whorl of leaves. So as the tree gets bigger, you often don't see the flowers because they open after the leaves open, and they are being hidden by the leaves. So it's nice if you have a spot where you can look down on this. But it's also nice when you can look up and under the overstory of this, because it's really quite beautiful. And then when they fall, it looks like somebody dumped a bunch of dirty laundry or something under your tree, because those leaves really do jump out at you. Magnolia macrophylla and some other, we have several big leaf magnolias in the southeast. But these have been used for wood products. I've got, I'm on the Magnolia Society International Board, and this was something they gave me after I gave a talk. Somebody had carved this. This is actually Magnolia fraseri, a different big leaf magnolia, but similar wood. And you can see it's a real even grain. It's kind of mostly they're kind of creamy white to pale yellow in terms of the coloration on there. They don't do well as planks, really. You wouldn't want to go a whole lot bigger than this with a flat piece, but they're nice for carving. And because of how the grain is, and it can, in thin strips, can be cut very, very even. It has been used, it was a traditional wood for Venetian blinds. There are also quite a few indigenous American uses for it as well, but really the one that, like, its big use when it was used more commonly was for Venetian blinds, which I always find interesting when you have, dogwood's used for golf club heads and magnolia is used for Venetian blinds. I like kind of these little niche areas where things are well known for their use. So this is another very important Japanese wood for construction and use. This is Chamaecyparis pisifera. And there are other Chamaecyparis species that are often used as well. Chamaecyparis obtusa is another Japanese species. We have our own native Chamaecyparis thyoides. All of them are very rot resistant. One of the reasons that some areas in the southeastern US were so important, like where I used to live, Hampton Roads, Virginia Beach, Portsmouth area at the coast, there was Chamaecyparis thyoides, which was good wood for boat building. There were bald cypress, taxodium, which you got nice long straight trunks, great for masts, and you had longleaf pine, which is good both for the wood for some parts of boat building, but also the sap from it was good for turpentine and pitch for boats. So you had all these great woods for boat building. So this Chamaecyparis pisifera, pisifera means pea-like. Pisa is the Latin name for peas, and that's because the fruits on it are little pea-shaped things. This is a form called Folifera aurea, that's gold threadleaf Chamaecyparis. Chamaecyparis, both pisifera and obtusa, are both been selected over the years for a lot of gold foliage types, dwarf crested types. So there are bunches and bunches of little dwarf ones. The straight species is a single trunk tree, kind of a, just your typical kind of conical conifer. It's really big, has big trunks. This Chamaecyparis pisifera folifera aurea, as a young plant, tends to kind of be a little weepy with its branches. And you can see here is the original tree, and when it was younger, some of those lower branches rooted in. Over time, it was, as the tree got bigger, either the branches from here to where it went in the ground were removed or died, and instead of getting rid of all of the surroundings, they were let to grow, which is not something you would typically do, but once you've done it, it looks really cool. So you got kind of this fairy ring around the main trunk of this plant. The wood from it is used a lot in Japanese construction. That's one of these woods that people know in their house. It's a real nice kind of yellowish color, which if then you use it outdoors, like in shipbuilding, it fades to gray, like a lot of woods do. Anything else? Musical instruments, another one that's good for musical instruments, but a lot of construction and furniture building and chests and things like that. Very heavily used in many of the Japanese palaces, including the Imperial Palace in, I know in Kyoto, I imagine in Tokyo as well, but very heavily used. Yeah, it would be similar to a cedar. Yeah. There's like a lot of conifers, fairly soft, but pretty durable in terms of outdoor use and things like that. And that's part of why it's used in boat building. Okay. So our next plant is Euonymus oxyphilus. We know Euonymus mostly through the little ground covering Euonymus fortunii, and and burning bush Euonymus elatus. But there are a lot of tree form Euonymus in Asia and some in Europe that we just don't grow very much that we should. They're actually great plants. This kind of unusual formed one, this is one that fell over and was not righted when it was young, and so it's kind of arching over, which we either probably need to remove or else really clean up and make it into a piece of living art, is an Asian one. But the common name for these trees in Europe especially is spindle tree for Euonymus, because they make spindles for spinning wool out of these things. And the reason is the wood is hard, but very, very elastic. But very hard. So the other big uses for Euonymus, the tree forms, are for like making stamps, for personal stamps, for printing presses. They do mosaics out of them, that kind of thing, for carving, and it'll really hold the image for a long time. So wood etching, that kind of thing, they'll use for. If this weren't falling over and leaning over, what you get is a medium-sized tree with kind of nondescript foliage, I guess. It will generally, in many of these, you get really good fall color, small whitish green flowers followed by often red fruit. We don't see a lot of seedlings growing around our spindle trees. Every once in a while we'll see some, but not much. And then in the winter, you've got this really nice kind of whitish bark. There's a really nice, much nicer shaped one in Asian Valley. If you're walking to go onto the rooftop, and you go on the steps to the left as you're walking towards the rooftop, right there in the corner, there's a youngish one. It was one that, well, I think Tim and I moved it from another spot in the Arboretum in 2009 to where it is now. So I guess it's getting to be not quite as young, much like me. But they're really easy trees, pretty pest-free. Tend to have a nice form in the winter as well as summer, but really good wood for you know, if you want to make your own stamps. You can turn it like you do with a spindle and then carve in your, you know, your personal chop. So one of the most widely used woods in woodworking anywhere, certainly in the temperate zones, is oaks. This is an Asian evergreen oak, Quercus glauca. It doesn't have the big lobes like many of the oaks we think of, but these Asian evergreen oaks tend to be elliptic, sometimes serrate like this, sometimes with a more smooth margin. They're sometimes separated from the oak genus Quercus as Cyclobalanopsis. Cyclo referring to turning because the acorns, the cap on the acorns, you know how most are kind of scaly? For the Cyclobalanopsis, they're in rings. It's very distinct, but it's an oak. It's Quercus. So I have a special fondness for these. This one in particular, Quercus glauca, is named that because, especially when young and out in the sun, the tops of the leaves have kind of a dark bluish color, and the bottom of the leaves have the kind of silvery blue, and it gives overall, especially in sun, kind of a bluish look, a glaucous look to it. So this tree actually predates the Arboretum. There's a handful of trees that are still on the grounds that are from, we're not even sure with many of them, the 50s, perhaps earlier. And this is typically a single trunked tree. However, the really bad freeze of 1985 killed this to the ground, and it has resprouted from the ground. So that's why it's a multi-trunk tree like this. So normally you would see a trunk like this nice smooth bark before it comes up. And this, the Cyclobalanopsis, these ring cup oaks, as they're known, were another one of those very important shipbuilding woods in China, especially Japan, a little less. So traditional Chinese shipbuilding, but also furniture, construction, kind of anything. You know, good hardwood, so for joining, you know, using those for joining, that kind of thing. We grow several other species of the ring cup oaks, but if you go on Western Boulevard, just by us, in the median of the roads, there is Quercus myrcenifolia, the myrtle-leafed ring cup oak that are growing there, that have been growing there for ages. Nobody's sure who planted them. My guess would be Noel Weston when he was horticulturist for Raleigh, but there's no record of that, and he's sadly passed now. But I'd love to know that, but they're a nice small tree that's a tough spot in a median, and they just look fantastic out there. So there's some trees. So right Western Boulevard, right behind the Arboretum. So kind of from Gorman Road down towards campus. You look in the median, there's these nice kind of round-headed trees. There's also a huge, and I got to go back and check. I can never remember if it's myrcenifolia or glauca in the Court of the Carolinas, if you know NC State campus. There's a massive one down there. It's myrcenifolia. It's huge. Biggest one I've seen in the U.S. or Asia. Massive. It's very cool. Any other questions?
So what do you do with the wood of this?
What do you do with the wood of this? You build traditional Chinese boats.
Like regular oak?
Yeah, like regular oak, it's good for kind of any general woodworking purposes. You can turn it, you can use it in planks for construction, you can do furniture with it. It's really a kind of all-around useful wood. Another native North American tree, not native to North Carolina, but native to North America, is Sequoia sempervirens. Again, sempervirens like boxwood, evergreen. But this is the coastal redwood. Giant redwood is Sequoia dendron giganteum. So Sequoia sempervirens. Beautiful, large trees. They don't get to be the size here as they do in coastal California. And that's really these giant trees like the Sequoia dendron and the really big sequoias. Part of the reason they get that big is because there are these fogs that roll in off the coast every day. Talk to an engineer about how difficult it is to get water 200 or 300 feet in the air. And trees got to try and do that naturally. And it literally is impossible. It's why when you see pines, they grow up, they have that nice pyramidal shape. And once they get to a certain height, they become very flat topped. And that's because the water can't get up any higher. It's just, that's kind of the limiting factor often in these. So those rolling fogs help hydrate the top parts of the trees. There are genetics involved with that too. So not every tree that you bring fog through is gonna do that, but so the wood in coastal redwood tends to be pinkish to red, very pretty, used for a lot of purposes, decking, outdoor furniture, indoor furniture, floor, veneer, kind of whatever you need, it's good for. But one of its great characteristics, the reason it's often used outside, is because it does almost no shrinking and swelling with different temperatures. It is very, very stable. So you don't have to worry about things starting to fall apart as they expand and contract over time, because it does very little of that. It's also very, very weather resistant, rot resistant, and very, very durable. But it's actually an easy plant to grow. One of the biggest issues it has is, see how this wood is kind of shaggy? It should not be like this. What our gray squirrels love this bark for their nests. And so they tear it up, and in some places, I mean, they kill trees. I've seen bigger ones with this where gardens have like put chicken wire around it to try and protect the tree. They can be really, really devastating. They're not awful with ours, but getting a lot worse than they used to be. It seems to be the bigger the tree gets, the happier they get to use it. But beautiful tree. Sequoia dendron, on the other hand, almost impossible for us to grow. But the sequoia is easy and won't get nearly as big as it does out west. Questions?
Is it evergreen?
It is. Sempervirens, always green. Yeah, it is not a deciduous conifer. The question was, is it deciduous or is it evergreen? And the answer was yes. Here we have the coffin tree, Cupressus funebris, funeral. This is another Asian conifer. Actually, it is one of the important shipbuilding, traditional Chinese shipbuilding woods, Cupressus, but especially Cupressus funebris, called coffin tree, or sometimes weeping cypress, because it kind of all hangs down. But it was used traditionally in coffins, and for the same reason that it was used for shipbuilding, in that it is extremely durable and rot resistant. And you want your loved one to stay in the box as long as possible. They'll get very large. They're relatively quick growing in their natural habitat, which while these are very cold hardy, tends to be a little more subtropical and monsoonal, lots of rain, lots of heat, really pushing it along. You know, it's a beautiful landscape plant with that weeping habit. You know, looking at the trunk, it could be confused with a lot of things, like cryptomeria, which is beside it, which is another important lumber wood in Asia. In fact, there are large areas of Asia where the entire overstory is Cryptomeria japonica, the Japanese cedar, where at certain points the governments have gone out with planes and dropped just tons and tons of seed into mountainsides because it was such a valuable wood. This is long before, you know, places had thoughts about their native plants or things like this. But there's some debate over whether there's only one species of Cryptomeria japonica. There's another or subspecies or variety, sometimes called sinensis or Chinese form. And there's some debate over whether that's actually a real thing or if it's all just the Japanese cedar that's been grown for so long in China and Taiwan. So you get two for the price of one there, the Cryptomeria and the Cupressus funebris. Questions? So the wood, I am I can't get the word out. Actually, not entirely sure. My guess, based on what I know about Cupressus and some of these other woods, is it's a soft wood, but it would have kind of a yellow color, at least when it was fresh. It might go to gray, but yeah, I mean, kind of fir-like, yeah.
Are these commercially available here?
They commercially available here? I don't know that. My guess is not cheaply.
Did you plant all of these, or are these seedlings of some of the others?
No, these are the traditional JC Raulston Arboretum way of planting large trees, is on 3 and 4 foot centers. We're trying to move away from that. We're not being entirely successful with it, but yeah, this is just things planted when they're small. We're evaluating them. It's about time for us to cut these down, really. Yeah, we don't keep trees forever. I will say, going back to Cryptomeria, traditionally the most common tree form of Cryptomeria in commerce in the US is one called Yoshino. And there has been, I remember when I was younger, a lot of effort gone into trying to figure out where Yoshino was developed, why it was selected for horticulture and all these things. And like many plant things, we're all siloed. And everybody that I was interacting with was looking at it as an ornamental plant and why it was selected as an ornamental plant. Was it did it stay greener over the winter when a lot of them can get bronzy? What was it, just a better grower? Winds up, it was a forestry tree. It was a selection that was grown because it was quick growing, had good wood, went straight up, was just a better, if you were going to grow one selection of Cryptomeria for your forest, your lumber production, you would do it with Yoshino. And that it wound up getting in the hands of the horticulture side. And it's a great plant because it grows quickly and it's very straight, and you know, it's what we think of as typical Cryptomeria or Japanese cedar.
Do you ever find seedlings from this?
Do we ever find seedlings from this? I'm looking around to make sure I'm not going to be called a liar. I've never seen seedlings from Cupressus funebris. I have seen it fruit. In fact, I can see a couple of cones right here. So these are young seeds. They'll mature and dry and turn brown and open up and release the seeds inside like they're little cones. All right, this last plant I put on here because I felt like I had to really complete the traditional Chinese shipbuilding. This is Cunninghamia lanceolata, the China-fir. And this is another quick growing conifer. Used, like I said, in traditional shipbuilding and general construction. Fairly rot resistant. Not used a whole lot otherwise in the US anymore, although it could be. It was, you go through the South and you see a lot of great big ones, often variety glauca, which has more blue foliage than some others. This is one called Chasen's Gift, which tends to stay denser even when it gets old. It was named by a North Carolina nurseryman, David Johnson at Johnson's Nursery, for his son, Chasen. One of the interesting things about China-fir, Cunninghamia, is most conifers, most of these tall conifers, if you cut them, that's it. They do not come back. But with Cunninghamia, you can cut it off at the ground and it will regrow. And you can let it all grow. This is one that has been cut out, and I don't know if you can see it, but it's got multiple trunks. You can let multiple trunks grow. You can let one grow. It'll take you a few years to get rid of, it'll keep trying to send up multiple trunks, but eventually if you get one going, it'll take over and it'll really grow. So it's a wood that you could actually coppice. And what's nice about it is if you grow it, you cut it, and then you let it grow again, those new trunks will get good size pretty quickly. It'll get what would take you maybe 10 years to get with the original plant, you'll get in, say, maybe 6 years, because you had that root system that's pushing everything up. So it is something that could be used as a renewable wood if you wanted to harvest it. I haven't actually seen the wood on this. My guess is it's a yellowish white, but don't know. Carrie, are you nodding because you know it? Yeah. It's a good plant. So, most of what you see in terms of even specialty lumber, you have your traditional lumber, which is, pine, oak, poplar, that kind of thing, burnt veneer. And then if you go to specialty places, it's usually tropical hardwoods. And some of these other temperate species, which could be really good kind of mid-range in terms of cost, much lower impact in terms of environment. We could really be using and looking at more of these, but currently we're not really seeing that. But it'd be nice to kind of flip that on its head. So thank y'all all.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.